States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. As for the president, I have maintained this position. The entire administration has always said that President Trump is willing to pick up the phone and talk. And the president met with his trade team this morning, and he directed them to have tailor-made trade deals with each and every country that calls up this administration to strike a deal.
Can you explain the White House's evolution from this is not a negotiation on tariffs to countries should pitch us and start negotiations on tariffs?
As the president said yesterday, Jasmine, both things can be true at the same time. And it is a non-negotiable position that the United States has faced a national security and economic crisis because of the unfair trade practices by countries around the world. As for the president, I have maintained this position. The entire administration has always said that President Trump is willing to pick up the phone and talk. And the president met with his trade team this morning, and he directed them to have tailor-made trade deals with each and every country that calls up this administration to strike a deal. And listen, and each and every one of these trade deals should be tailored and unique based on that country's markets, based on that country's exports, the imports here in the United States of America. What makes the most sense for the American worker and for our industry? The president is focused on putting America first.
So was the evolution not factored in or determined by kind of the tumult in the stock market? Was that not a part of the consideration to start making these negotiations and deals?
Again, I would reject that there was an evolution. On day one, we had said that the president will always pick up the phone for other nations and other companies that call this administration. The president always has a listening ear. And it's a non-negotiable fact that America has faced a national security and economic crisis for many decades, and President Trump is just the first to address this.
And then my last question, how will negotiations change how much revenue the White House is planning to make from the tariffs?
Well, that has yet to be seen, but as the president said, the reciprocal tariffs, which will continue to go in effect as these deals are negotiated and ongoing, will generate trillions of dollars in revenue to the United States. And this is twofold. The president wants to onshore jobs here to the United States of America. He wants to boost our manufacturing industry. He also wants to tackle these crippling deficits with almost every single country around the world. Jackie.
Thanks, Caroline. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, warned that some of these negotiations might take up to months, that we could be doing this through April, May, and into June. And then you had Kevin Hassett say it's going to take a lot for the president to put his signature on the line because he wants to make sure there's a good deal for America. Is the president operating on any sort of a timeline or deadline where he wants this completed by?
Well, we always move at Trump speed here at the White House, which is incredibly fast. I know you all know that from covering this White House day to day. The president likes to get things done, but he's very much focused on ensuring that these deals are good for the American worker. They are good for American manufacturing. And again, that they tackle these crippling deficits with these countries. All options are on the table for each country. But again, these are going to be tailor-made deals. They are not going to be off-the-rack deals, as the president has called it. And he has directed his entire trade team to be part of this effort. So that includes Secretary Bessent and our National Economic Director, Kevin Hassett. It also includes Secretary Lutnick, Peter Navarro, the entire trade team, Jamieson Greer, who was on the Hill today. Everybody who was involved in this incredible, fair, reciprocal trade agenda will continue to be involved in negotiating these deals.
I'm curious, though, under what conditions at this point would President Trump talk to President Xi about tariffs?
Look, I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that Xi and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
So China has to call first?
The Chinese want to make a deal. They just don't know how to do it. But the president will be implementing these 104% tariffs on China tonight.
And under what conditions might he consider lowering tariffs on China at this point?
It would be imprudent of me to tell you those conditions here from the podium. Sure, Gabe.
Thanks, Caroline. with regards to the Supreme Court ruling on the Alien Enemies Act, you're right, it was a win for the administration, but the justices also said that deportees are entitled to due process. Does the administration agree with that?
That's not quite true, Gabe. They said that they are entitled to a habeas petition, and we are going to continue to comply with the law, and we are wholly confident that every single person that has been deported under the Alien Enemies Act, every person that will continue to be deported under the Alien Enemies Act qualifies for that deportation.
NBC News is reporting that the administration is considering drone strikes on drug cartels in Mexico. We're citing several officials. This morning, Mexico's president was asked about that, and she said that we reject any of those actions. Your response?
I saw that reporting. I don't want to confirm it from this podium. I don't want to comment on it because I'm not sure, but I would defer you to the National Security Council.
So you haven't confirmed the report, but with Mexico's president saying that she rejects any of that, what would your response be? How is the relationship then between Mexico's president and the White House right now over targeting drug cartels?
Well, first of all, the relationship between President Sheinbaum and President Trump is quite good. And I think both world leaders would tell you that. The president has been engaged directly with President Sheinbaum on a number of different topics, particularly when it comes to clamping down on the Mexican drug cartels, on clamping down on illegal immigration, human trafficking, drug trafficking through our southern border. She's taken significant steps towards doing that. But as for that specific report, again, I'm not going to comment.
Karoline, two questions on trade. First, as a part of these negotiations, is it possible for countries to lower their tariffs below that 10% bare minimum that's been set?
Again, I'll leave that to the president to make those determinations, but I can tell you that 10% universal baseline will go into effect as these negotiations are ongoing.
Got it. And then what is your thinking just as far as low labor cost countries? Like if you've got a country like Vietnam that wants to negotiate, but obviously they have some advantages in terms of trade, in terms of the people there are not paid as much as American citizens. What is kind of the thinking? Can they still achieve a good kind of trade outcome with the United States?
Well, again, you're right to point out that different countries have different labor markets. They have different skills, if you will, different resources, and the president is going to take all of that into account. His team will take all of that into account when they're negotiating these deals. I do just want to point out one thing, that the president, everybody in Washington, whether they want to admit it or not, knows that this president is right when it comes to tariffs and when it comes to trade. In fact, Democrats have long said that the United States of America has been ripped off by the countries around the world. They just don't want to admit it now because it's President Trump who is saying that. In June of 1996, Nancy Pelosi spoke on the House floor. She urged her colleagues at the time to fight against the status quo trade policies that had contributed to America's trade deficit with China. In fact, Nancy Pelosi said, "How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit? How many jobs have to be lost for the American workers? How much dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, 'I will not endorse the status quo'?" Those are the words of Nancy Pelosi in 1996. Well, President Trump is finally answering her call 27 years later. Nancy Pelosi can thank President Trump today for the 104% retaliatory tariff that will be going into effect on China. In 2007, Chuck Schumer spoke of our nation's crippling trade deficit, saying, "These are the kinds of records the American people don't want us to be breaking. The administration needs to move beyond words, take action now to reverse a trend that threatens our prospects for future economic growth." And Chuck Schumer said that in 2007. Finally, in 2025, President Trump is taking action. Recently defeated Democrat Sherrod Brown said on deficits in 2012 that our deficit then at China had reached an all-time high, and it was on pace to recede. Last year's record, the trade deficit had cost American workers millions of jobs at the time. These are the words of Democrats years ago. It is about time America finally has a president who is taking action to restore those millions of jobs back to the United States of America, to boost our manufacturing industry. He's doing what's right for the American people.